Have you ever watched someone get caught in a mistake so obvious that even a child could see it and still walk away insisting they were right all along? Not a small slip, not a minor misunderstanding, a real, undeniable error, the kind where the evidence is sitting right there on the table between you. And instead of a simple, "you're right, I messed up," you get silence, a change of subject, or somehow, impossibly, the whole thing becomes your fault. I have seen this so many times, in friendships, in families, in offices, where everyone could feel the tension in the room, but nobody said a word about it out loud, that I started wondering what is actually happening in that moment. Because it is not stupidity. It is not stubbornness in the way we usually think about stubbornness, the kind where someone just digs in their heels for the sake of winning. There is something else going on underneath, something that has very little to do with the mistake itself and almost everything to do with what that mistake threatens to reveal. Let's call him he, because he is not one person. He is a pattern you have probably met at a dinner table, in an office, in a group chat that went quiet at exactly the wrong moment. He sits across from you, fully aware that the facts are not on his side, and somehow still finds a way to make the conversation about something else entirely. Psychologists who study this behavior keep circling back to one idea. For a lot of people, being wrong does not feel like making an error. It feels like being exposed. Not "I did something incorrect," but "I am, at my core, someone who fails." That distinction sounds small, but it changes everything about how a person responds when reality contradicts them. He is not protecting an opinion. He is protecting an identity. And once you see it that way, the defensiveness, the excuses, the sudden anger, none of it looks irrational anymore. It looks like self-preservation. The same kind of instinct that makes a person flinch when something comes flying toward their face, except here the threat is not physical. It's the threat of being seen as less than he needs to believe he is. You may have felt the edge of this yourself, that flash of heat in your chest the moment someone points out you got something wrong, before your mind has even decided how to respond. That reaction is older than logic. It's something the body does before the brain catches up. And once you notice that in yourself, you start to recognize it everywhere else too. Which raises an obvious question. If this reaction is so universal, why does it show up so much stronger in some people than others? Why do some people apologize easily, while others would rather lose a friendship than say 3 words? That's exactly what I want to walk through with you, one layer at a time, starting with the version of this you can spot from across a room, and ending with the part that most people, including the person doing it, never fully see in themselves. There are about 6 different ways this tends to show up, and they're not random. They build on each other.
The first one is the kind of thing you have probably noticed in passing without really naming it. By the time we get to the last one, you will likely recognize someone specific, maybe even a moment from your own life that you had filed away as that one weird argument without realizing it was part of a much bigger picture. So, let's start with the easiest one to spot, the one that happens right out in the open, in front of everyone. The first thing you will notice is the redirect. He makes a claim, the claim turns out to be wrong, and within seconds, the conversation is no longer about the claim. It is about your tone. It is about why you are always trying to prove him wrong. It is about something you did 3 years ago that has nothing to do with the current topic. I have watched this happen in real time, and it is almost impressive how fast the subject changes. He's not lying about feeling attacked. From the inside, correction genuinely feels like an attack, so redirecting feels like defending himself, not like dodging the truth. You may know someone exactly like this, the person who, in an argument about whether a restaurant takes reservations, somehow ends up making it about how you never listened to him. Or maybe it shows up at work, in a meeting where a project deadline was clearly missed, and within minutes the conversation has shifted to how unrealistic the original timeline was, how nobody gave him enough resources, how the whole team has been disorganized for months. None of those things may even be false, but notice what they accomplish. They move the spotlight just far enough away from the one fact that started the conversation. The redirect works because it is exhausting to follow. Most people give up chasing the original point just to make the conversation bearable again, and that exhaustion is exactly what lets the pattern survive. But the redirect is just the visible surface. Underneath it is something a little harder to catch because it doesn't look like avoidance at all. It looks like generosity. That second layer is what I think of as the technicality escape. He won't deny being wrong outright. Instead, he'll find one tiny detail in his original statement that was technically accurate and use that sliver of correctness to avoid admitting the larger error. Well, I did say it might rain, when he had actually insisted with total certainty that it would not. This one is sneakier because it looks like honesty. He's not refusing to engage with facts. He's hyper-engaging with one fact while ignoring the spirit of what was actually said. You've probably had a conversation that ended with you more confused than when you started, not because the topic was complicated, but because the goalposts kept sliding a few inches to the left. Think of the friend who promises to be somewhere at 7, shows up at 8:30, and when you mention it, points out that he never said which 7 he meant, as if there were several to choose from. It sounds almost funny written out like this, but in the moment, it rarely feels funny at all. It feels like arguing with someone who keeps changing the rules of the game mid-play. This is where you start to see that this isn't really about facts at all. Facts are just the battlefield.
The real fight is happening somewhere else, somewhere quieter. And to understand it, we have to look what happens after the technicality runs out. When the technicality stops working, when there is truly nowhere left to hide behind a half-truth, something interesting happens. The apology arrives, but it is not really an apology. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry if that came across wrong. Notice what is missing. There is no admission that anything was actually incorrect. The sorrow, if you can call it that, is redirected onto your reaction instead of his action. I have heard this called the non-apology, and once you learn to listen for it, you hear it constantly, in workplaces, in relationships, even in public statements from people who clearly have professional help writing their words. He has learned, somewhere along the way, that the appearance of remorse can stand in for the substance of it, and that most people are too relieved to hear the word sorry to notice the sentence never actually said what it needed to say. This is where you may start to feel something shift in how you see him. Not annoyance exactly, but a kind of sadness, because a non-apology only works on someone who has been trained not to expect a real one. And that training usually starts a long time before you ever met him. Underneath the non-apology is something that explains why it exists at all, and this is where we start moving from behavior into the actual machinery of the mind. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a fragile sense of self-worth that has been quietly fused with the idea of being right. Somewhere in his history, being correct became tangled up with being valuable, and being wrong became tangled up with being unlovable, or unworthy, or simply not enough. This is not a conscious calculation. He does not wake up and decide to fuse his identity with correctness. It happens slowly, often in childhood, often in homes where mistakes were met with disappointment instead of patience, where a wrong answer brought silence or sharp words instead of, "That's okay, let's figure it out together." If you grow up in an environment like that, admitting an error in adulthood does not feel like a small correction. It feels like reopening a wound that was never properly closed. You may recognize this pattern in someone whose parents praised achievement constantly, but said very little about effort or character. That praise sounds like love, but it teaches a brutal lesson underneath. You are only as good as your last success. Picture a household where report cards were the main currency of affection, where a single B grade brought a long, quiet dinner and no real conversation about what actually happened. A child raised that way does not learn that mistakes are part of being human. He learns that mistakes are dangerous, that they cost him something he cannot easily get back. And by the time he's an adult sitting across from you at that dinner table, the lesson is so deeply wired in that he is not even aware he is following it anymore. That fused sense of worth explains the next layer too, the one that is the hardest to watch because it looks the most like cruelty, even though it really is the most fear. This is the moment he turns the mistake into your fault. Not just deflecting, but actively rewriting the story so that you become the one who caused the problem. If you had explained it better, I wouldn't have gotten it wrong. You're the one who confused me. This is not him being a bad person in some simple sense. This is what happens when someone's nervous system genuinely cannot tolerate sitting in the feeling of having failed. So the feeling has to go somewhere, and the nearest available target is whoever pointed out the mistake in the first place. I have seen this wreck friendships and marriages, not because the original mistake mattered, but because nobody ever got to feel heard about it. Imagine a couple planning a trip, and he books the wrong dates for the flight. But instead of a simple acknowledgement, the conversation turns into a list of everything you did that supposedly distracted him while he was booking it. 3 things from that same week that had nothing to do with travel plans at all. By the end of it, you're the one apologizing, even though you're the one who lost the money on the ticket. You may have a person in your life who does this so consistently that you have started rehearsing conversations in your head before you even bring up small issues, just to protect yourself from the blame that you already know is coming.
That exhaustion you feel, the one that makes you want to just let it go instead of saying anything at all, is the entire system working exactly as it was built to work. And that brings us to the 6th layer, the quietest one, the one that does not look like defensiveness at all. This is the moment he simply rewrites the memory. Not maliciously, not even consciously most of the time. He genuinely starts to believe a different version of events than what actually happened. I never said that. That's not how it went. The unsettling part is that he often means it, with the same calm certainty you might use to state your own name. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction, and the mind is remarkably good at reconstructing events in a way that protects the story we need to believe about ourselves. If admitting the original version is too threatening, the brain sometimes simply stops storing that version at all and replaces it with one that does not require an apology, almost like editing a document and saving over the only copy. You may have experienced this firsthand, the strange vertigo of being told with total sincerity that something you clearly remember simply never happened. It is one of the most disorienting things another person can do to you because you start to question your own memory just to make sense of theirs, wondering for a moment if maybe you were the one who got it wrong, even when every instinct tells you that you did not. So if you put all 6 of these side by side, the redirect, the technicality, the non-apology, the fused self-worth, the blame reversal, and the rewritten memory, you start to see they are not 6 separate behaviors at all. They are 6 different distances from the same center, 6 different ways of running from the same unbearable feeling, which is the fear of discovering that you are, underneath it all, not as solid as you need to be. He is not protecting a fact when he refuses to admit he was wrong. He is protecting a structure that was built a long time ago, often before he had any say in how it was built. And that structure has convinced him that being wrong and being worthless are the same event. Which leaves the harder question, the one that is less about him and more about you. Is there someone in your life who fits this pattern? And if so, has it ever occurred to you that his refusal to admit fault might not be about disrespecting you at all? It might be about a much older conversation he is still having with himself, one that started long before you walked into the room. Maybe it started at a kitchen table decades ago, or in a classroom where a wrong answer once felt like the end of the world. You are not the cause of it, even when you happen to be standing closest to it when it goes off. And maybe it's worth asking yourself something else too, something a little less comfortable. Are there places in your own life where you do a smaller version of this, where being wrong feels just a little too close to feeling unworthy? Most of us have at least one corner like that, one subject where we get strangely defensive over something that, looked at honestly, really doesn't matter that much. Maybe it's your driving, maybe it's your cooking, or the way you handle money, or some old skill you were praised for once and never quite let go of needing to be praised for again. Noticing that corner in yourself doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you're human, built the same way as everyone else, shaped by the same kinds of moments that shaped him. If any of this felt familiar, there's another side to this same coin worth exploring. The people who go the opposite direction, who apologize for everything, even things that were never their fault, and what that says about a completely different kind of fear hiding underneath an instinct that looks like the total opposite of what we just talked about. It's a strange mirror to this one, and I think you'll see the connection almost immediately once we get into it. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this one. If it gave you a little more clarity about someone in your life, or maybe about yourself, let me know in the comments which of these 6 you recognized first. I'm genuinely curious which one hits closest for most people. And if you want more of these honest looks at the patterns we all carry around without realizing it, stick around and subscribe. There's a lot more of this to dig into together.